Today we've got Samantha Marika on the show. Incredible videos she's been doing that are really penetrating the culture. And in the time we're in right now, she's hitting all the hot topics. She hasn't been afraid to talk about anything. So I think what she's doing is incredible. You know, it's sad that in society right now, we're in a place where we're racializing so many things. So, you know, I think especially for her being a young, you know, Black woman, it's especially a lot harder for her, I would think, you know, to come out and do what she's doing. So we wanted to bring her on today to, you know, kind of elevate her voice, see what her experience has been like. But we've been blown away by the videos she's been doing. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank
Samantha.
you. Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to ask you, you know, I think the natural first question is what inspired you to do this? Because, you know, you could tell me I'm wrong, by the way, in terms of this being more difficult, but I just see it as, you know, I'm Latino, and I know even for me, being in Hollywood, being a director, and the environment that was so, you know, unwelcoming to Republicans, it makes it difficult to sort of like take that leap. Now, I'd imagine it's sort of a similar thing for you, you know, like I know, especially in youth culture, like, you know, it's so easy to latch on to the like everything should be free mentality. So I'm wondering, what was at the root of all that for you?
You know, honestly, I've been talking about politics since 2015, and I'll say it was like mostly on Facebook. But I think what really got me, like, I was like, no, I can't just be silent on Facebook anymore, was just that whole George Floyd incident. Because I remember I just woke up one morning and then like I turned on television and there was that whole memorial, and I was like, you know, a couple weeks ago, even like a week ago, you couldn't have a funeral for anybody because of COVID. And then you turn on television and there's all these politicians and celebrities, everybody that said we were gonna like basically die or kill our grandmas if we were to go outside. And they're at this memorial. And not to say that he didn't deserve a memorial, but it was just so suspicious. And then like you see Al Sharpton up there saying we're gonna take the White House and make it all about politics. You know, they took George Floyd's murder and made it about politics. And I was just like, they're just using Black, like, and for that instance, they're just using Black people to like promote their agenda. And I was like, this is disgusting. And so I just made a video. I had no idea it was gonna take off like it did, but yeah, I just couldn't be silent.
That's how I saw it too, is they were really capitalizing on Black grief, you know, and
yeah.
I don't think there's anything more horrible, and they have a pattern of doing this. I think if people really examine it and they go back and they look, and it's especially tied to when there's an election, but beyond that, just the very idea that they could try to even use this for politics when Minnesota is run by Democrats. There's a Democrat governor. There's a Democrat mayor of Minneapolis where this happened. That Democrat mayor installed the police chief in Minneapolis. Democrat lawmakers have control over what happens policy-wise in terms of reform within those departments. So, you know, the very idea they could even try to make it about politics is a joke because, you know, when Democrats are controlling everything, you're the ones who failed to step up. So if you really want to talk politics, that's the direction we should go in. But instead, they've latched onto this idea that, you know, police somehow make their own rules, which is not how it works. And that, you know, you need to abolish the police to solve the problem. So I guess that kind of takes you to the core of what, you know, the media sort of pushes that BLM stands for versus the reality of what they stand for. Because you have one of the founders of BLM as recently as this month saying that she's a trained Marxist. So when they're not even trying to hide the fact that one of the founders of BLM is a trained Marxist and that they have political goals that would, you know, essentially lead to toppling what our system is now and replacing it with Marxism, you know, when they're not even trying to hide that, I just think it's so hard to take the media seriously when they try to then frame it as something different, you know? So how do you feel about BLM's real goals and what they are?
Well, even like their website says it's telling us where the funding is going, right? And like nobody's wanting to question anything. But I think BLM, this is what I think they did right. They made it a name which nobody could argue, right? They said Black Lives Matter, and obviously Black Lives Matter, and it was a genius thing because nobody can argue that. But this whole movement is political. Like, if it didn't go into like a Democrat direction and it was just a grassroots movement with local people, like local Black people running it, then absolutely I can get behind it. But it's not. It's run by these elitist Blacks, and it's pure corruption, really. All for a political agenda, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so much pressure, especially being young. How did you decide to break through that and decide to use your voice? You said you've been speaking out since 2015. I mean, what made you decide that was more important than keeping friends and staying quiet and just kind of capitulating to the mob mentality, the woke culture?
Yeah, I don't know. I've always been raised just to kind of think for myself, so I just did, and I definitely lost a lot of friends. And I think people are like so scared to speak out because they're gonna lose friends and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like if somebody's gonna not friend you because of politics or because of a certain belief, then why are you gonna be friends with that person?
Totally.
I think that's a great point.
It's interesting too. We just released the I Am Republican campaign, and it's like mind-boggling to us that the same people, literally some of the same people that iced us out and unfriended us and stopped inviting our children to their kids' birthday parties when we came out as Republican in Hollywood, are suddenly, wanting to jump on the train here. It's really people, I think, also latch onto this opportunistic culture of just this narcissistic, me. Oh, how can I further myself? And it's pretty remarkable to watch that happen in real time. And we went through that same realization that these people aren't actually your friends if they're going to unfriend you for having different ideas. So how do you navigate that now? I mean, with other conservatives, because you're sending your message politically, but I'm sure you're getting a lot of hate back for that. Do you engage those people? Do you actively have like a goal to change minds, inspire? What motivates you to speak out? And who supports you in doing that?
I think what motivates me to speak out is, I mean, obviously I would love to like change minds. It's very hard, but I would love to do that. So I kind of go into the direction of like, you don't have to be a conservative at the end of the day. I'm not here to force you to be a conservative. I'm not here to force you to be a Trump supporter or anything like that. I'm not going to shove it down your throat. But I just want you to wake up to what the left is doing. And so I'm just here to call out the left, really, like, because so many people are blinded by it, and it's right in front of them, you know what I mean? And they just choose not to see it. And so I think when you do have more young voices, it kind of gets people to say, maybe that is right, and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is changing minds, and I think it's sort of a collection of a lot of people like us that are willing to step out there and do this and try to break down a lot of the stereotypes. I think that the more that we find people like us doing that, the more we're going to have people changing their minds, because it's really hard for the Democrats to spin a narrative that Republicans are racist, that they're, xenophobic, that they're misogynist, that they're all these things, when all the evidence is contrary to what they're saying. And with how interconnected our world is now, it's kind of hard to escape the evidence as it grows. So, I think that is a healthy byproduct of like what people like you are doing. And I think that, you're going to keep growing. We were just talking about it before the show. I think that, within the year, your platform is going to be gigantic, because when you speak truth the way you're speaking truth, people will come,
right.
And I think
I want to encourage people to watch your most recent video. That's the one where I was blown away. For people who haven't watched it, we'll put a link in the thread here after the live stream, but will you kind of maybe recap what motivated you to talk about like culture, the rap culture, language in particular, how it's used to keep people in bondage mentally? Can you maybe share some of that video content with us?
Yeah, I would say the biggest problem I think Black America has right now is we have like a cultural identification problem. We're so quick to jump, like to make our culture about like words we say, like the N-word or stuff like this, like rap music, the hood. It makes everybody like I always get called, oh, you're not Black enough if you're not from the hood, like you can't speak on stuff. but the hood is socioeconomic. Like has nothing to do with being Black. There's middle class Blacks, upper class Blacks, and we just have this cultural identification problem right now. Like culture should be music, food, dance. I don't get why we keep making it about socioeconomics, and everything that Black America relates to our culture is negative, you know?
Right.
And then you get called like an Uncle Tom if you speak out on it. And Uncle Tom was a positive guy. He was a good guy. And it's just crazy how everything flipped and everything's like, and now everything's negative and we're putting it. Even like when Trump said thugs, Black America ran with it and said, oh my God, he's calling us out. Why do we have to associate Black America with thugs? But we do it to ourselves. So yeah, the culture problem is,
well, I think that sorry. So, I noticed media, who primarily is owned by white, wealthy men, but they seem to highlight and focus on negative aspects of certain parts of the culture. And I think that is done intentionally. I'm seeing that it's done intentionally now. And to me, it's racism. To only represent that side of the culture, or to hyper represent that side of the culture. It's happening, movies, films. It's always like this quintessential negative, stereotypical, character using this certain vernacular, and that puts that imagery in people's minds. And I think that's done such a disservice to Black Americans, because there is such diversity and individuality. And we just miss that. We miss that as a society, as consumers of media, as consumers of music and art. It's such a shame. And I believe it's done intentionally. What do you think about that? How Black culture is represented in media and film, TV, music?
Yeah, I mean, middle class Black America is never represented in media. It's always just the lower class and then the elitists like Beyonce and Jay-Z, but you never see middle class Black America being represented. And honestly, if we wanted to get change in the Black community, I think that middle class Black America needs to be represented more in media, because people that have lower socioeconomics, the odds of them becoming the next Jay-Z and Beyonce are very low. Like, not that it can't happen, but it's just not that reality, right? But it's more likely they're going to become middle class Black Americans, but we don't want to show that. And so it makes it almost impossible to achieve if you're lower class Black American, because the only thing they show us is upper class, the elitist. And it's like, I can't do that. I can't make it. And so they just give up, right? And they don't really have to try. But if we showed Black America, middle class Black America, it's more in grasp. We can become that. We can do that. We can, have our own businesses, go into the trades and do all that stuff, but they don't show that. And there's definitely a reason they don't show that, because they don't want us, it wouldn't fit the agenda. Let's just say that.
You're absolutely right. And I think that what this goes back to and ties into is the bigotry of low expectations, which is something that I think the left is it's intrinsically tied to the way they operate. It's, you look at things like voter ID, it's just the bigotry of low expectations. They think that Black people don't know how to get an ID. I have tons of Black friends, coworkers, they all have IDs.
I'd be embarrassed
I would be so embarrassed to ask that question to one of my Black friends. Yeah. It's like calling them stupid.
It's horrible.
And I don't think of them as somebody incapable of getting an ID. It's the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard of. But beyond that, you look at things like CNN, there's this subconscious stuff that people don't think about. Like when CNN is out there during a riot and there's a building burning in the background and they have a guy with a bunch of young Black males behind them while this building's burning, and they say, oh, it's been mostly peaceful. What they're doing is they're setting a low expectation. They're saying that, hey, as long as it's just a building burning, nobody's getting shot, it's peaceful. And with it sets this low barometer. Whereas if CNN was out there and it was, anybody else out there and that was going on, they would frame it differently. And they do that intentionally because they want to keep the riots going. They want to keep the burning going. They want to keep this narrative of you versus them, Black versus white going. When that's not reality. That's not the way that we should be living. I feel like we're at a point where there's such a large group of us that are ready to move beyond race, beyond racializing everything, and they want to appreciate each other's cultures and our differences and everything. That's something that my wife had never really gotten into Cuban food before she met me, and we got married, and now, you know, she loves my grandpa's, you know, Cuban cooking and everything, you know, like those types of cultural exchanges and differences can be a beautiful thing and can be really fun, but that's not what we're celebrating anymore. It's just sort of this idea that if you look different than me based on these immutable characteristics, then, you know, you could never possibly understand my experiences. And why we're framing ourselves into such a negative corner where our first thought is, you can't understand me, I have no idea. Because if we want a healthy society, you know, who goes into a relationship or a friendship going, there's no way you could understand me? If you go into every relationship or friendship that way, you're never going to have friends. You're never going to get married. You're never going to have positive interactions with people. So the fact that the media and a whole party of people on the left are trying to frame two dominant races in our country against each other with that mentality of, you could never understand me, it just blows my mind. So, you know, how destructive do you think that is to the moment we're in?
Oh, absolutely destructive. And even just to talk about like CNN and stuff, you know, they're showing all this stuff happening, and there's white people like protesting and burning and looting, and there's also Black people, and they're showing like Black people looting and all this stuff. And yet they say that they're for like Black people, right? CNN and everything. Why are they always showing negative imagery of Blacks? And then they wonder why white America sometimes thinks, oh, you know, they might get a little scared or whatever. And I don't think it's racism. I think it's just because of all this imagery that predominantly CNN and all these mainstream medias are showing. MTV, BET, and even going back to like the word, like the N-word, isn't it just so weird that like that's the one word that never seems to be blocked or muted, you know, because they want us to keep hearing that, and they want us to keep seeing these images also of like Blacks acting out and all this stuff. Why don't they show like positive things of Black America, middle class Blacks? Like why are they not showing this stuff?
Well, I think it's interesting as a director. So I've directed Snoop Dogg, I've directed Gucci Mane, I've directed Ty Dolla $ign, Machine Gun Kelly, like all these rappers. And I don't understand how the woke mob has not gone after rap music. I mean, like just listen to some Eminem songs. Oh my God. The dude's like, he hates Trump beyond belief. And if you just look at the lyrics to his songs, like I can't repeat them. I probably would get kicked off Twitter if I repeated them. It's that bad. Like some of the lyrics are just like, they're the most misogynistic songs you could possibly imagine. Right. And somehow even like a built grandfathering thing. Like what is that?
Even just like the images of like Black women in like these music videos and stuff, you know, it's completely disrespectful. And I don't know. And then they have the audacity to turn around and say, oh, we're for like Black America and we're for the people and all this stuff. Then stop showing us negatively. Stop talking about us negatively. Stop saying all this negative stuff. Thugs, gangsters, you know, the N-word, all this stuff constantly. Like show us elevated, show us higher. We want to see that. That's what people need to see.
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk a little bit about just, I remember us having so many conversations just like morally about certain treatments that were, you know, handed back to you and how, you know, as much as you would try to try to tone down certain treatments and be like, hey, I don't like this narrative. Can we have the woman fully dressed, actually at a job or doing something? No. She's got to be naked, gyrating against some, you know, the rapper. I mean, it's the label execs, it's the artists, it's everybody involved in entertainment that is complicit in this imagery and misogyny and all that stuff. But it's so funny because it's the same thing they just, you know, blabber about.
Yes.
They're the biggest virtue signalers I have ever seen. The same people who are demanding that we put girls like almost completely nude in music videos and like, hey, here's the line. This is where they'll still air it and they'll still feature it on YouTube. So we just stay on that line right there, but let's have the, you know, smallest amount of clothing we could possibly put on a person. They're the ones doing that while at the same time then going and, you know, virtue signaling about all of these issues on social media. So, I mean, that'll just never stop blowing my mind.
And if you like question it too, like, why are you guys doing this? Oh, you're then they just come back with, you're a sexist. Women should be able to do whatever they want, you know? There's just no winning. There's no winning.
I like once they find out I'm Republican, if I was like, hey, I would like to put, 5 girls, and I put the same scenario that they ask me for, they would go, oh, you're a misogynist. They would actually then do that back to me. But if I'm not a Republican and I do that, they'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's do that. That sounds great. And then if anybody questioned me, then I would be allowed to say, women are in control of their sexuality. What's wrong with you? You don't want people to control their sexuality? You think that they're not fully able to realize their potential and their full femininity as a woman? You want to rip that away from her? Like they would have some whole screed about what a terrible person, you are. So it's just, it's interesting, the hypocrisy that they're okay with, and I think that's sort of like one of the things I'll never be able to understand, and I think that's hard for people on the right that are open at this point about their politics, is like, I don't think we ever will actually grasp what's going on in their brains on the left. I don't think we will. No. Like this type of stuff. I don't know how you get there.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. I mean, these people contradict themselves left, right, and center. Like, I don't know. And the problem is there's no room for like discussion then, because if you want to talk about race, you can't, because you're going to be a racist or something, but they can talk about race and they can do all this. You want to talk about women, you can't, because you'll be a sexist, but they can do whatever they want and they can show women in whichever light they want. It's just, I don't know. I feel like if we want real change, we got to take both sides and have a conversation, but they don't want to talk. So
I think that's a great point. And you know what, you talked about something earlier I wanted to bring back, is you were talking about Black Lives Matter as an organization, how smart the name was. And I always tell people, like, we have to differentiate the words from the organization. When I'm talking to somebody on the left or somebody in the middle who maybe doesn't understand they just don't pay attention to politics, but they're hearing sort of what's going on socially, is like, separate the two. Because the statement, I have no problem saying Black Lives Matter, like, your life matters to me. That's not an issue at all. My issue is with the organization Black Lives Matter, because they are a political organization and they don't hide it. They're completely open about it. They're fundraising through Act Blue, which is the Democratic Party's digital fundraising platform. So, the more you explain those things to people, for the people who are watching right now, that like, I like to always arm people with like their own knowledge that they can use when they're talking to people on the left or talking to people in the middle. You kind of have to have sort of like a loving, understanding thing with them. That's like, look, yes, the phrase is not an issue. It's the organization, and be able to bring the facts to the table that like, they don't hide the fact that they have a Marxist ideology. That's what they're after, and then we have Hawk Newsom, who runs the New York chapter of BLM. We may have him on the show soon. Maybe interesting to do a debate with
That'll
him.
Be fun.
It would be fun to see you debate him. But he actually just said recently that, we're going to burn things down if we don't get what we want, and when Martha McCallum on Fox challenged him about it, he said, oh, well, I could be speaking figuratively or not, and it's just sort of like, they're being very open about how far they're willing to go. I mean, even at these rallies, they have these signs that say, it's the Malcolm X quote that is at all costs. It's like, God, I can't remember. Well, it's like basically like, we'll do anything at all costs to get what we want.
The phrase, no justice, no peace means something to two different sides. Can you explain that, like what it means to you versus what you think it means to the left? Or like just on our side, like on like from a conservative viewpoint, like no justice, like we want justice. And we advocate for peaceful protesting, and but they literally take it as a, if they don't get what they want, there will be no peace, and we'll create violence. Like they take words.
We'll take over 6 blocks of Seattle.
Right. So my point, like the linguistic manipulation that goes on with words. It's a consistent theme.
Well, even they have like the audacity to chant in the streets, and I'm not against peaceful protesting at all. Like, if you want to do that, that's fine. But they have the audacity to like chant in the streets, no justice, no peace. And then here we are. Okay, the police officer was already, he was arrested and everything, and they're still doing it. So I don't know, like what do they want? Like what is their definition of justice is the true question, because they're still going. So I don't know what they want at this point. I mean, obviously they want a conviction, but I think even after that, like say he was, they would this will still be going on. They're still gonna be tearing down statues and I don't know.
I don't think I realized that this wasn't about George Floyd when they took a forklift to the front of a Macy's so that they could go in and rob it. That was the moment for me where I was like, I don't think that George Floyd is the reason they got behind that forklift and smashed into the front of the Macy's. I don't know, but I was going to ask you, like, since you've started doing this, coming out and making these videos, how has the left treated you? Like, what has happened, on that end of things? What's the feedback been?
Yeah, it's been pretty negative. Again, like the left just has like the left just says, whenever I speak, oh, you're not black enough. And that's coming from like whites and blacks on the left, which is hilarious to me. And they say that, and like I'll never understand. I'm a middle-class American and stuff like that. Again, I find it so funny and ironic that they have the audacity to chant in the streets, Black Lives Matter, and then turn around and completely like criticize me and put me down and say all this stuff because I don't agree with them. So it's not all Black Lives Matter. It's just the select Black lives that think like them matter, truly.
And that's something we have to make abundantly clear on every level that we can, social media and real life. Like, this movement does not stand for all Black Lives Matter. All Black lives should matter, and their opinions should matter. Like, your experiences as a young Black woman should not be discounted or, any less worthy because of where you grew up or the fact that you had, parents who were there for you and like were, good parents. Like, none of those things should negate your experiences. And I just think it's so sad that on the left, like, because I've seen this from white liberals, especially, where they said this to Black conservatives who did not come from a lower economic status or didn't have both parents in the home, where they go after them and say, hey, your opinion's less worthy than somebody who did grow up poor or had only a single mom or whatever it is, because that's basically saying that, like, you're not, it's kind of like Joe Biden, you're not Black unless you do this. Like, so you're not Black unless you're poor and vote for Joe Biden is essentially the message that they're saying, when we should be in every race in America trying to promote the idea of a healthy family unit and prosperity. Like, those should be the goals for everybody in America, regardless of what their race is. But what they're spitting out towards conservative Black people seems to be the antithesis of that, So it's just kind of sad because it almost sounds like they want people to not do well. I really can't see it any other way. That's what it feels like. Is that what it feels like to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And then like these white liberals, they have the audacity to say like that kind of stuff, like, oh, you're not Black enough, you never grew up in the hood and stuff. And these are these people that with like, these 4-year, 10-year degrees, and they're telling me like I can't speak on Black issues because I don't know, like I'm not poor, I've never been poor or something, like, and they have all these like, I don't know, it's just it's mind-blowing, really.
Well, you didn't study gender studies in college at Harvard, so your opinion really is
doesn't matter. Yeah,
parents does. I think that's sort of it's an interesting thing. I don't know where this came from, but we were talking about this actually. Was it yesterday or today? Talking about the moralizing, the moral supremacy. I think that's the goal. Like when it comes to things like white privilege, or sort of the way that they talk to Black conservatives. All of this comes down to moral supremacy. They like the feeling of feeling like, ooh, I'm important and I know something you don't know. And that's the idea.
I know better than you.
Yeah.
I know better.
Or I'm saving you, they feel so good about themselves. I'm saving Black America. Like I'm saving everybody. Right. We don't need saving.
Again, it's a lot like the bigotry of low expectations. It's its own form of racism, and I think they're totally blind to that. Even when it's like called out to them straight to their face by a Black Republican or by a Latino Republican saying, hey, actually what you're doing. Remember that lady? So last week, actually, I had this lady say to me, when Trump did the speech in Tulsa, he used the word hombre. Okay. And she said, it's racist for him to say that. And I said, well, actually, I'm Latino. You know, my mom's actually a Cuban refugee, and my family came here not speaking English at all. And I don't think it's racist at all. You know, it's just a word. In fact, it's kind of turned into a Spanglish word that a lot of white people use when they're talking about a man. You know, there's no racial connotation to the word in Spanish. And she was like, well, I don't care. It's offensive to me and it's racist. And I'm just like, did you get dropped on your head as a baby, or do you eat paint chips, or what's going on here? Like, I'm actually from a Spanish family, and I'm telling you, it is not offensive. And you, 38-year-old white lady in Los Angeles, want to tell me that it's offensive and it's racist. Like, I don't get it. Like, who are you offended for? Are you offended for yourself? You're not even Latina. Like, what? I don't get it. You know, I think it's bizarre. And that same type of people also then tell me that, you know, by denying the phrase Latinx, that I have internalized racism towards my own people, because I'm denying their humanity by not using the word, despite the fact that 99% of Latino people do not want to be called Latinx. That's
I know. I asked people, and they're like, no. Exactly. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I did a little poll, and I was like, who's agreeing with this Latinx word or Latinx or whatever? And everybody was like, no, like they don't. And it wasn't just like conservative people, like even just people like that don't do politics or whatever. Like what?
The more we get that out to like normal people, I think the more sanity we're gonna get.
Yeah, true, very true.
So
and then even like, oh, go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say like the thug, like you were talking about like what Trump said, and I was gonna say thug, because even like white people were saying like, oh, that's so racist that he said thug. I was just like, how is that?
It's racist of them, because the people were not all black. They were white people and black people and Hispanic people that were out there doing this. They're the ones who attached blackness to the word thug.
Yeah, you know? Yes. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's so funny when I remember helping this cleanup type thing, and I told somebody, yeah, we're going to this impoverished neighborhood, you know, we're going to help, we're going to clean up, we're going to do this. And they said, oh, don't you just feel so bad for this black and brown people or colored people or something like that? And I was
people of color, I think is what they said.
And I go, I didn't say anything about that. Why would you assume?
It's actually a white neighborhood.
It's
actually a poor white neighborhood.
Why do you say, that's what they think of. Everything is racialized, and in such a negative thing. If you talk about somebody who's your friend, who's successful, amazing, smart, intelligent, innovator, entrepreneur, they assume that it can't possibly be a black man or woman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's such, you know, if anybody has internalized racism, I think it's the people that are constantly talking about it, that are offended by Aunt Jemima while eating pancakes. Can't enjoy pancakes anymore.
Well, really, what they should be offended by is the ingredients. That's what they should be offended by.
Yes.
That's what they should be offended by. The ingredients in Aunt Jemima there's actually some stuff that's like not so good for you, you know? I would recommend having some natural maple syrup. But aside from that, I mean, like, we went through our kitchen the other day, like we were just joking with each other while we had our coffee. And we were looking through and we were like, how could they cancel all of these things? And there was literally a way to cancel almost everything in our pantry.
Oh yeah, we can see.
And it's just a matter of time. Like things that sounded ridiculous like 10 years ago are no longer ridiculous. Like the Dixie Chicks are now just
gosh.
You know?
I have a theory. The Dixie Cups. I have a theory that it's the White House is going to be next.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's a great theory. Yeah. That Mount Rushmore is going to be there. I'm shocked they haven't tried to destroy Mount Rushmore already, but they're definitely going to. That's like, there's no question about that. But I think you're right about that. I think the White House is going to be one of the next targets because, you know, ultimately they're going to go back to, they're going to be like, well, it wasn't built by white people, you know, so why are we calling it the White House? You know, it's the same thing as we have real estate agents now being trained not to use the word master bedroom because it has racist connotations. I have never in my whole life, I've heard the word master bedroom a million times. I have a sister that's a real estate agent. I've never in my life ever associated the word master bedroom to racism, to Black people, to white people, to slavery, to a slave master mindset. Like, I think anybody who does is a psychopath.
So
and I
unhealthy.
think that they belong,
so unhealthy to think like this.
They belong
like,
in the care of a doctor, because you have lost your damn mind if you hear the word master bedroom and you think about slaves and masters. There is something wrong with you. I don't understand that at all. Like, does that stuff make any sense to you?
No, even like the statue thing, pulling down all the statues and everything. The problem is that they really don't have a goal. Like, they don't have an end goal to anything, which is the problem. Because if their end goal was to stop racism and stuff, that's not how you do it. Taking down statues is not going to make somebody not racist. And they have no end goal. So the problem is they're just going to keep going. They're going to keep finding everything. The White House, oh my gosh, they're going to change everything. And what they should have done, instead of investing all that energy and time into taking down statues, was demanding, hey, we want to see more Black statues. We want to see more historical Black, figures in statues. And I think everybody could be like, oh, okay, yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's do it. But they don't do that.
You're the first person I've ever heard say that. The first person I've ever heard bring up, I mean, that seems like the most common sense thing that I've ever heard with the statue debate is just, hey, how about honoring some historical Black figures and putting them in positions of honor? That should be a no-brainer. Like, who's going to argue with that?
Also, history, upgrading our history textbooks with actual Black history. The first, congressman, the first senator. I mean, there's some amazing milestones that are part of our history that are how our country was built, and how wonderful it is largely due to these monumental achievements of Black Americans. And, when they talk about how history is whitewashed, guess who's in charge of academia? Who's in charge of our history books? Who's in charge of our English? Everything. So they need to be looking at themselves as to why they're unhappy. And that's what they should be changing. There's definitely a list I could point these people to if they have so much guilt, like the white, guilt syndrome. If they want to actually be effective and active, there's like a laundry list of things they could be doing that would be way more effective than just virtue signaling and posting a Black square on Twitter. DM me if you need some ideas.
Yeah, DM if you need some ideas.
Well, the truth is, like, they don't want to show that. They don't want that to be in the history books, because they don't want to show, like, and I'm talking about the left. They don't want to show Black people like up. Like, they want us to be here, because then they'll always have control of us. And
what does that mean?
What we need.
If that narrative is squashed, if Black people are actually successful, equal, capable, what does that mean? I mean,
they lose the vote.
They have a hard time saying that. Like, they can't even utter that, the same sentence. Like, Black people are capable and
just
extraordinary and innovative. I don't hear them use that language to talk about Black Americans.
They don't. They talk about Black America like, you will always need me. You'll always need me. You'll always need me to take care of you.
I feel sorry for you. How can I help? Oh,
that's
I need a kneel. Yeah.
I want to live in a country where we look at each other and we believe in each other, and I don't think that's a lot to ask for. I really don't. And it's sad we've gotten to this place. You bringing up the statues. I think a lot of people are guilty of thinking of the statues as just pieces of, stone that have been chiseled away at and made into, look like the image of someone. But they're more than that. Even the statues that are controversial, that are bad in a lot of people's minds, they're not just pieces of stone that have been chiseled away at. They're pieces of history, and you can make arguments to put them in museums or whatever, people, if they're angry about it, it's a free country, make that argument, and if it's a winning argument, they'll get moved to a museum. But it's beyond that. The issue here is, like, when people are tearing down statues, the places we've seen this before is, number one, most recently, ISIS. Okay, ISIS did this to statues they don't like. That's not a group that I really want to emulate. But beyond that, on a country level, where we've seen this is Venezuela and Cuba. The Cubans, people like my refugee family, they warned Venezuelans when Maduro came to power, or when Chavez came to power. And when Chavez came to power, a lot of the Venezuelans were like, no, we know what freedom looks like. We're not going to let the same thing happen here. But the same thing happened in both cases. The statues went. Then it was, art in general. Then it was certain TV shows and movies you can't watch. And the list goes on, and they took control of academia. They took control of basically every institution, every pillar of society they take control of. And then once that happens, eventually there's no way to fight back, and people end up dying, like what we've seen in Venezuela. When they try to fight back, they get shot in the street by their own government, and that's what happens as you go deep down this line. Now, I'm not saying socialism's or communism is right behind, the door, that, next week we could be a communist country, but we're on the precipice of something that turns into that. And that's something that I think people need to be aware of and really take seriously, because when countries don't take it seriously, they end up like Venezuela is today, where people literally, if you're pregnant right now, I just read this really sad piece. This lady, she was pregnant. She was 8.5 months and she went into labor. They had to go to 9 hospitals until one would let her in. And they only let her in because her mom broke the window at the hospital and forced the security guard to take her inside. And because she didn't get care, the baby died. That baby had no problems. They only died because they needed to be delivered and they were stuck in a position where they couldn't breathe. So that's what happens in these countries when you allow those statues to go and people think, well, they were controversial, and you don't think about where it leads to. And you don't stand up and say, you know what, maybe we should do this in a way that's not destructive. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Let's do this a way where everybody has their say. We can vote on it on a local level or whatever it is, give people their say and do it in a democratic way. Because when you just go to pure destruction, it leads down a very dangerous path. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And even like how you said that they start taking movies and stuff, entertainment down or whatever. It's happening now. Just even you can't be conservative and be on social media, basically. They're shutting down all the voices on the opposite side. And we should have both I think at the end of the day, we should have both voices. We should have liberal, the actual real liberals, liberal voices, and then conservative voices. But they're completely shutting off all conservative voice just so they can promote their agenda.
Yep. And I appreciate that Parler exists and everything, but I think the problem there is we have to make the decision. Do we want to live in echo chambers or not? Because I would rather not live in one. I would rather live in a world where we can debate ideas, we talk about them freely, and we're not afraid we're going to lose our jobs. We're not afraid that, we're going to have somebody attack our home or attack our family or, write a death threat or whatever. I would like to live in a world where we can just talk and have differences of opinion and nobody's hateful, nobody's a racist, nobody's a homophobe, nobody's a misogynist. We're just having a conversation. We may agree, we may disagree. And I think that that's sort of the weird thing with something like Parler is that do we want to turn the world into a place where, okay, well, Democrats have their own Twitter and then we have our own Twitter and they have their Facebook. We've got our Facebook. If we're going to do that, we might as well split the country up. But again, then places like China and Russia, they're getting what they want. What they want is us split up and divided, So I think it's interesting that with all of the Russia mania that the Democrats had for the past 3.5 years, they're the ones that are doing everything Russia could ever dream of doing to American politics and to America in general. They're dividing us, So how do you see that?
Wow, actually, that's a good point. I never really thought about the Parler thing as that, but I guess in a sense, by us all going to Parler, it's basically saying, okay, it's basically letting the left win, really, when you think about it.
In a lot of ways, that's how I feel.
Yeah, that's go ahead. That's true.
I was just thinking my 2 cents about, is, I hate having to manage. I'm terrible at social media, having to manage more than one thing. It's so stressful and overwhelming to life. And I would rather have more human interactions. So I think that the idea of having just another thing to manage, is a little overwhelming. But at the same time, there's that saying, if you're at the table, get up when love is no longer being served. If there's no real, good faith debates happening or conversations, and you're arguing with a faceless troll, probably being paid in China, sweat lodge or something. Sweat camp, not a sweat lodge. Sounds actually nice. I'd like to go to one.
Nice, yeah.
I'm not talking about that.
I was thinking that too.
So, my point is,
Yeah, if you're arguing with somebody who's basically being paid to argue,
that's what it feels like sometimes. It's and you're still in an echo chamber of even on Twitter because you're being shadow banned and silenced and suppressed. So people aren't seeing you that would be exposed to you even in the, that are neutral.
Yeah.
So, I kind of, sometimes you have to carve out your own, place and say, this is what we're about. You're welcome to join us if you can be nice.
And for the record, I do have a parlor and everything. I'm just
they
saying,
can't.
I'm just saying, I think that in a lot of ways it represents sort of a cultural shift that is more important than people realize. Like if we're all at a point where we're so defeated by the way social media treats us that we're retreating to a place where we're just among each other, that's not a super positive sign of a healthy society. That's something that we should be concerned about rather than celebrating, hey, we have a place where we're not going to be shut down. Like, that's not something to celebrate. The fact that we are living in a country where, despite having the president of the United States agree with us on politics, us electing him to office and us controlling the Senate, we're still in a country where our voices can be shut down by major social media companies because they don't agree with us. That should be concerning to us in a way that I don't think has been appropriately displayed or discussed in the media. I think it's concerning.
That would be the ultimate win, is for those companies to be regulated. And there's a really good argument for that because of life-saving content. When we have to flee the fires in California, when we have a extreme weather update, it's a public square. It's where we go for life-saving information that's up to date in real time. We don't turn on, Channel 4 News. We go to Twitter, and it's helped our family and kept us safe. So, there's a good argument for that to be regulated for sure.
I'm interested to see what you think about it because there's two schools of thought here. The sort of old school conservatives that, they take real pride in being just 100% conservative all the time. They're like, any regulation is bad regulation. Well, I don't think that's a great idea. If we had cell phone companies and, just your landline phone companies canceling your phone lines because they don't like the opinions you and your spouse or you and your friend talk about, we would all be losing our minds. We would be going nuts. And just the fact that there's other phone companies would not be enough for us. We would go, hey, what if all the phone companies don't allow us to talk? This should be a real concern. Then I can't call 911. I can't, there's all these emergency services you can't take part in. It's sort of the same thing. The idea of having a public square, that's what social media has turned into. My kids go to school. There has to be a Facebook page connected for certain homework projects. I think that's dumb, and I don't think schools should do that. But guess what? They do it. So, to participate fully in society, we've turned these social media giants into public squares. So while, yes, regulation is bad in a lot of ways for business, certain regulations for things like this that have to do with our ability to be a part of a free society are necessary to make sure that, some company like Amazon or Twitter or Facebook doesn't get so big that they have more power than the government does in terms of the people being able to freely take part in a conversation about who we are as a country and what we believe in. And, the minute that we've sort of succumbed to this idea that those masters should be responsible for what speech is allowed to be heard and not allowed to be heard is the moment that we've lost.
Absolutely. Even just the people that aren't even like conservative or liberal, just a lot of people that are just in the middle, and there's a lot, I just wish everybody would question, like, just have the question of like, well, why are they actually like trying to like block conservative voice? Like, at the end of the day, like, why are they? Like, that's the question everybody needs to ask themselves. Because we don't agree on politics, and that's fine, and that's absolutely okay. This is America. But the question is, why are they trying to block the voice? Because there's a bigger agenda going on right now. And I just wish people would question stuff. People are so afraid to go there and to question.
Me too. And a good way for people to question that is you just look at the situation with George Floyd versus the terror attack that happened in the UK just this last week. Raheem Kassim, who he is, I want to say he's the editor of Human Events. He was at Breitbart before as their editor. I think he's some position there. He posted about the terror attack, and it was a video of the terror attack, what happened. And Twitter suspended him, and a certain number of suspensions, you're then banned. And so they do this stuff intentionally. They say, oh, because it depicted a death in this terror scene, which is like, you can argue whether it's good or bad taste. That's an argument you can have. But the argument that you should be kicked off social media if you post a video of a terror attack is a pretty dumb one, I think. I think that, you should be free to do what you want. But on the flip side, not one person had their account harmed for sharing videos of George Floyd. And I guarantee you, if that terror attack that took place in the UK was not somebody who was an Islamic radical, doing this, and it was a police officer doing it, there would have been no issue with displaying the video. So, people need to question why that is. I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on. You can be a Democrat, stay a Democrat, but at least question that. Why is that the case? Why are we sort of selectively selecting a narrative that's allowed with, gory details, and then this other narrative with gory details is not allowed because, why?
It's racist.
The sort of idea it may produce, or what?
Yeah, exactly. And even just going with the narrative thing, like, I wish people would question also, going back to George Floyd, if George Floyd was like a hardcore Trump supporter, hardcore conservative, would he have been promoted all over social media and beyond? Exactly. So why are people not questioning that also?
That's right.
In all fairness, I was going to say nobody would know his name, but in all fairness, Nancy Pelosi does not know his name apparently, because she called him George Kirby today, which should tell everybody just how much she cares about George Floyd, because George Kirby is a black comedian who died in 1995. So maybe it's some of that like Democratic dementia that's been going around between Joe Biden and her. Maybe it's just that she doesn't care about George Floyd. I don't know. But you're absolutely right. If George Floyd was a Trump supporter, nobody would know his name.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. It's sad where we come to in society right now in terms of conservatives versus the left. I don't even think they're liberals anymore. Like, the old school liberal is dead, It's just this leftist mob. And it's unfair, though. It's unfair that conservatives can't have this voice, because I think this voice needs to be heard.
Absolutely.
Voices like yours need to be heard. And those old school liberals are now basically Republicans, because we talked about this recently. If JFK was alive today, the Democrats would say he was a misogynist, horrible person, and they would have killed him. They hate JFK's policy beliefs.
Even Obama's views just 8 years ago would be so controversial today. It's absolutely insane. I feel like we could talk forever. I mean, we so enjoyed this conversation. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. We have children.
And we have to pick up that dog who just got fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to our viewers.
He's not having a good day.
Yeah, he's got his little,
We bring the dogs on the show sometimes, so everybody knows Boss Dog Boss got his little acorns chopped off today. So say a little prayer for Boss. He's not having a happy day. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming on.
Everybody follow her. We're going to put her link to her video and social media accounts. So thank you so much for joining us today, Samantha.
Thanks for having me. You guys are awesome.
You are too. Keep doing what you're doing.
And bye, Lola. To your cute French American. What kind of bulldog is he?
Yeah, what kind of bulldog?
She's English.
English bulldog. Bye, Lola.
You had to give her an accent, huh? Well, thank you guys for watching today. Remember to like, subscribe, recommend to your friends, share this with people. Voices like this need to be heard. And definitely follow her if you're not already. She's posting incredible videos. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
Bye, y'all. Have a great day.